Lacey Chabert was always known as the girl who could make people smile even in the darkest times. She had a special charm, something that touched hearts without trying too hard. Her journey in Hallmark films was not just about acting, but about bringing hope to people who had almost forgotten what love felt like. Every movie she worked in was not just a film, but a story that carried a message for someone watching. People often said that her characters were not only written on paper, but lived in her eyes. One evening, as the snow fell quietly outside a small cinema hall, a group of friends sat together. They were discussing which Hallmark movie of Lacey Chabert was the most powerful. Each one had their own favorite, but none could agree on just one. That night, their discussion turned into something more, a deep emotional journey into the world of her films. They decided to watch her movies in order, ranking them by how much they touched the heart, not just by popularity. Sarah, the quiet one in the group, spoke first. She remembered a movie where Lacey played a woman who had lost everything but still found love again. Sarah's voice cracked as she shared how the story reminded her of her own life. She had lost her parents at a young age and always felt like love was too far away from her. But when she saw Lacey's character smile through her pain, it gave her courage to believe again. For Sarah, that movie was not just number one on the list, it was a reminder that broken hearts can still heal. Daniel, on the other hand, had a different opinion. He loved the film where Lacey played a busy woman who returned to her small hometown for Christmas. At first, she wanted to escape from her past, but slowly she rediscovered family, warmth, and love she had left behind. Daniel said that movie made him cry because he himself had moved away from his family for years. The way Lacey's character walked back into her old home, nervous but hopeful, reminded him of his own struggles when he returned after so long. For him, that film deserved the top spot. The group laughed, argued, and even cried as they shared their memories tied to each film. What they didn't realize was that each movie they talked about was also stitching them closer together. These weren't just Hallmark stories anymore. They were stories of their own lives reflected through the screen. As the night grew deeper, suspense started to build. Each friend felt like they were not just ranking movies, but ranking their own emotions. The more they spoke, the more secrets came out. One friend revealed that he had once proposed to someone right after watching a Lacey Chabert film, but she had said no. Another admitted she kept watching one specific movie every Christmas because it was the only way she could still feel her mother's presence after she passed away. The room was filled with silence for a moment. Everyone felt the weight of their emotions, and all eyes turned to the screen where another film was about to begin. The story that was playing seemed almost too close to their reality. A woman searching for love, a man afraid to open his heart, a family broken but slowly finding each other again. It was at that moment they realized something important. Ranking her films in order was not really about deciding which was best. It was about discovering which story touched which part of their soul. For each one of them, the number one movie would always be different because pain, love, and hope were different for everyone. Yet, the suspense still remained. They had only begun this journey. Part of them wanted to know which movie would finally win their hearts as a group, but another part wanted to hold on to the mystery. Because sometimes, the beauty of a story is not in the ending, but in the path it takes you on. Lacey Chabert's world was slowly becoming their world. And as they pressed play for the next film, none of them knew what memories it would awaken, what emotions it would bring out, or what secrets it would reveal. The only thing they knew was that they could not stop now. Something inside was pulling them deeper, and they were ready to follow. The snow outside kept falling, covering the streets in silence, as if the world itself wanted to pause and listen to their hearts. And within that quiet night, the group's journey into the ranked order of Lacey's Hallmark films had only just begun. The next morning, the group gathered again. Their eyes were tired from the late-night discussions, but their hearts carried a strange excitement. They had only touched the surface of Lacey Chabert's films, and already, they felt connected in ways they hadn't before. This was no longer just about watching movies, it was about finding hidden pieces of themselves in each story. As the second movie started, the room filled with warm light from the screen. This film was about a young woman who had always dreamed of starting her own bakery, but life kept pulling her away from her passion. Lacey played the lead, and as she poured her heart into her dream, every viewer in that room felt her struggle. Maya, one of the friends, leaned forward. She whispered that this was her favorite because it reminded her of her own journey. She had wanted to be an artist, but responsibilities had forced her into a job she never truly loved. Watching Lacey's character fight for her dream felt like a mirror of her own life. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks, and the others listened quietly. For Maya, this movie was more than entertainment, it was a voice telling her not to give up. Daniel looked at her with soft eyes. He had never known how much she carried inside. For years, Maya had smiled and laughed with the group, but behind that smile lived a story of sacrifice. Suddenly, the movie wasn't just about a bakery anymore. It was about courage. It was about daring to chase a life you truly wanted. The friends began to argue again. Was this movie better than the Christmas one they had seen last night? Sarah shook her head, saying no. For her, the story of love after loss was still stronger. Daniel agreed, but Maya defended her choice fiercely. And that was the beauty of it, every film felt like it belonged at the top, depending on whose heart it touched. As the story on screen unfolded, the group fell silent. They watched as Lacey's character faced setback after setback. Investors rejected her, friends doubted her, and even her family warned her that dreams were dangerous. But she kept going. There was something in her eyes, a fire that refused to fade. And when at last she opened her bakery, the audience in that small room clapped softly as if they too had won something precious. In that moment, they realized why Lacey Chabert's films felt so different. It was not about glamorous lives or perfect endings. It was about ordinary people, fighting silent battles that no one else could see. It was about hope sneaking into places where everything seemed dark. Later, as the credits rolled, the group sat in silence. No one wanted to speak first because they all felt something heavy yet beautiful inside. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. She said, "Maybe we are not ranking films. Maybe these films are ranking us. They are showing us who we are." Her words stayed in the air like an unspoken truth. Outside, the day was turning colder. The snow from last night had grown thicker, covering every corner of the street. The world outside looked frozen, yet inside that room, warmth spread quietly. Each friend realized that the films were becoming a map of their emotions. Then came another twist. While preparing for the next movie, Daniel received a message on his phone. His face changed as he read it, but he quickly hid his expression. No one asked him anything, but Sarah noticed. She always noticed small things about people. She could tell something was wrong. Daniel excused himself and stepped outside for a while. The cold wind brushed against his face, but his thoughts were heavier than the snow falling around him. The message reminded him of something he had been avoiding for years, a letter from someone he once loved. That person had moved far away, yet the memory was still alive. And now, watching these movies was opening wounds he had kept hidden. When Daniel came back, he smiled as if nothing had happened. But Sarah's eyes followed him, full of questions. She wondered if one of these movies would someday bring out his truth. Suspense hung in the air, and no one knew how deeply the next films would reach into their lives. The group pressed play again, but this time, they weren't only waiting for a story on the screen. They were waiting for something inside themselves to unfold. Each one of them carried a secret, and somehow, Lacey Chabert's world was slowly unlocking those secrets, one film at a time. And so, the ranking continued. But little did they know, the real ranking was happening inside their own hearts. The room grew darker as evening settled in, but inside their hearts, light flickered with every story. They had already seen how one film brought Maya closer to her forgotten dream and how another reminded Sarah of hope after loss. Now, the third movie began, and with it came a new wave of emotions. This film told the story of a woman who returned to her hometown to help save a small library that was about to close. Lacey played the role with such gentleness that it felt like she was protecting more than just books. She was protecting memories, history, and the heartbeat of an entire community. Tom, the quietest of the group, leaned back against the wall as the film played. He usually spoke little, but tonight his eyes told another story. Halfway through the movie, he whispered, almost to himself, "This is my favorite." Everyone turned toward him, surprised. Tom hardly ever expressed his feelings, but his voice carried weight. He explained that when he was young, his mother used to take him to a small library every Sunday. That library was where he discovered stories that kept him company when the world outside felt too loud. But years later, the library closed down, and with it, a part of his childhood disappeared. Watching Lacey's character fight to save the library reopened a wound he thought had healed. For Tom, this film was not about a building, it was about holding on to something precious before it slips away forever. The others listened in silence. They had known Tom for years, but never this part of his story. Slowly, the group began to see a pattern. Each movie was unlocking pieces of them that had been hidden for too long. It was as if the films carried a secret key, opening doors inside their hearts. The debate started again. Sarah still believed the love after loss story should be at the top. Maya defended the bakery film, and now Tom fought for the library one. Their voices clashed, but their smiles showed that this argument was different. It was not about winning. It was about protecting the part of themselves that each movie touched. As the story on screen reached its climax, the tension in the room rose. Lacey's character stood in the library, almost defeated, ready to give up. The town was against her, the funds were not enough, and her dream seemed impossible. But then, one by one, the townspeople stepped forward, offering help, bringing books, donating money. Slowly, the library came alive again. The group watching felt goosebumps as the screen filled with scenes of hope and unity. Maya clapped softly. Sarah smiled through tears. Even Daniel, who had been carrying his hidden pain since that morning's message, found himself breathing easier. Tom, however, stayed silent, but his eyes glistened in the dim light. When the credits rolled, no one spoke for a long while. The snow outside tapped against the windows, as if nature itself was keeping rhythm with their silence. Finally, Maya said, "Every movie feels like it's written for one of us." And she was right. The ranking game was slowly transforming into something else. It was no longer about deciding which film deserved first place, it was about discovering which wounds inside them needed healing. But suspense still lingered. Sarah couldn't take her eyes off Daniel. She had noticed his strange expression earlier, and now she felt even more certain that something was troubling him. She wanted to ask, but the group was too caught up in their emotions. Daniel smiled and joined the conversation, but his heart carried a storm no one else could see. As the night went deeper, they decided to continue. They brought blankets, warm drinks, and settled closer together. Each one of them knew that the next films might bring even heavier truths. Yet no one wanted to stop. There was something addicting about seeing their lives reflected in these stories. For Tom, it was about lost childhood memories. For Maya, it was about a dream waiting to breathe again. For Sarah, it was about believing in love after heartbreak. And for Daniel, it was about a secret that had not yet been spoken. The group pressed play once again, unaware that the coming story would not only test their emotions but also bring them face to face with truths they had avoided for years. The snow outside thickened, the wind howled, and inside the small room, their journey into Lacey Chabert's films continued, pulling them deeper into a world where fiction and reality were slowly becoming the same. The night grew longer, but no one wanted to stop. The room was filled with a quiet energy, as though each story was tying invisible threads between their hearts. They were no longer just friends watching films, they were travelers on an emotional road, guided by the characters Lacey Chabert brought to life. The fourth movie began. This time, the story was about a woman who had once been deeply in love, but life had pulled her away from it. Years later, fate brought her back to the same town, face to face with the man she had left behind. It was not just a love story, it was about choices, regrets, and the courage to face the past. As the film unfolded, Daniel's face grew tense. Every scene seemed to echo something inside him. When Lacey's character stood across from the man she once loved, Daniel's eyes softened. He shifted in his seat, trying to look away, but Sarah noticed. Her heart whispered that this was the story Daniel had been carrying all along. Halfway through the movie, the group paused for tea. Laughter filled the air as they teased each other about ranking, but Daniel stayed quiet. Finally, Sarah leaned closer and asked, "Are you okay?" Daniel forced a smile, but she didn't believe it. She had known him too long. When they returned to the movie, Daniel's silence became heavier. On screen, the woman was torn between staying in her comfortable life or taking the risk of loving again. The pain in her eyes seemed too familiar. Sarah wanted to reach out, but something inside told her to wait. The others, caught in the story, didn't notice. Maya argued that this film should be number one, saying it showed that true love never really dies. Tom disagreed, insisting the library story was still stronger. Sarah barely joined the debate, her mind fixed on Daniel. Then, as the movie reached its emotional peak, Daniel suddenly stood up. Everyone turned, startled. His eyes glistened in the glow of the screen. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. The room froze. Daniel looked at his friends and then down at the floor. "This movie, it feels like it's talking to me. Years ago, I was in love. I thought it was forever. But I let her go, because I was too afraid. And tonight, watching this, it feels like she's right here again." His voice cracked, heavy with the weight of years. Silence fell. Even the sound of the snow outside seemed to stop. Sarah's heart ached for him. She had guessed, but hearing the truth was different. The others didn't know what to say. They weren't used to seeing Daniel so open, so vulnerable. He continued, "That message I got earlier, it was from her. After all these years, she wrote to me. She's getting married soon." His words trembled in the air, cutting through the warmth of the room. No one moved. The movie still played, but its story had merged with Daniel's confession. On screen, Lacey's character was choosing whether to stay or to leave again. In the room, Daniel had already lost his chance. Maya reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe you lost her," she said softly, "but maybe you didn't lose love. Maybe you just haven't found where it belongs now." Tom nodded, though his eyes were heavy. Sarah sat still, holding back tears. She wanted to tell Daniel that love still waited for him, that maybe it was closer than he thought. But her voice stayed locked inside. The group let the movie finish in silence. When the ending came, showing Lacey's character finding her courage to love again, Daniel looked away. For him, it was too late. But for the rest, it was a reminder, love could vanish if you didn't fight for it. As the credits rolled, no one clapped this time. The weight of Daniel's story lingered. The ranking game felt far away now. What mattered was the truth that these films were pulling out of them, one by one. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Snow piled high against the windows, and the wind howled as if the world itself was crying with them. Inside, the group sat closer together, each lost in thought, each touched in a different way. They didn't know it yet, but this night was changing them forever. The movies had started as entertainment, but they had become mirrors of their deepest selves. And as they prepared to watch the final film, one question hung in the air: what secret would it reveal next? The storm outside was louder now. Snow pressed against the windows as though the world wanted to lock them inside this moment forever. The friends sat quietly, their hearts heavy after Daniel's confession. What had started as a simple game of ranking movies had turned into something none of them could have imagined. Still, there was one last film left. The final one on their list. They knew they had to finish what they started, even if their hearts were not ready. Slowly, Tom pressed play, and the screen lit up once more. This story was different. Lacey played a character who had lost everything: her job, her family, her sense of direction. She felt broken, wandering through life without purpose. But along the way, through kindness and unexpected friendships, she slowly found the courage to rebuild herself. It was not about romance this time. It was about healing. It was about starting over when the past seemed too heavy. As the film unfolded, every friend in that room saw themselves in it. Sarah thought of her parents and the way she had carried their loss for years. Maya thought of her abandoned dream, still waiting for her. Tom thought of his childhood library and how pieces of it still lived inside him. And Daniel, he thought of the love he had lost and the chance he never took. Each scene felt like a mirror, showing them the wounds they had tried to hide. But more importantly, it showed them something else: hope. The character on screen did not give up. Even in her darkest hours, she chose to believe in tomorrow. Sarah leaned forward, whispering, "Maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the #1 film." Maya nodded. Tom wiped his eyes. Daniel said nothing, but his silence was full of meaning. Then came the turning point in the film. Lacey's character stood alone in the cold, looking at the horizon, deciding whether to walk away or to take a step forward. In that moment, the group realized that they too were standing at a crossroad, not on screen, but in their own lives. Sarah finally spoke to Daniel. "Maybe you lost her. But maybe your story isn't finished. Maybe you still have a chance to love again." Don't let this be the ending. Daniel looked at her, surprised. For the first time that night, he saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't just talking about the movie. She was talking about him. And maybe, she was talking about herself too. The film ended with Lacey's character smiling, not because her life was perfect, but because she had chosen hope. The screen faded to black, and silence filled the room. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of the final story pressed against their hearts, but so did its light. Finally, Tom broke the silence. We can't rank them anymore. They're not just films. They're pieces of us. Everyone agreed. The game was over, but something greater had begun. They had walked through laughter, tears, confessions, and silence together. The films had not only entertained them, they had healed them in ways they never expected. Daniel looked around at his friends. His eyes were softer now, calmer. Maybe she's gone, he said quietly. But tonight showed me something. Love is still possible. Maybe it's right here, closer than I thought. His gaze lingered for a moment on Sarah, and her cheeks flushed. She quickly looked away, but her heart beat faster. Maybe the movies had given them more than just memories. Maybe they had opened doors to new beginnings. The storm outside began to slow. The snowflakes softened, falling gently as though the night itself was at peace. Inside the room, warmth spread among the friends. They were no longer the same people who had gathered here just a day ago. Something had changed. Something had healed. As they packed up the blankets and empty cups, Sarah whispered, "We didn't just watch Lacey's films. We lived them." And she was right. The ranked order no longer mattered. What mattered was the journey, the tears that fell, the truths that surfaced, the love that still waited quietly in their hearts. The night ended not with answers, but with something stronger, hope. And as the group stepped out into the snow, their footprints marked the beginning of a new story, one they were now ready to write together.